My name is Emily Willis. Today is April 16th, 2018. The time is 5:04 p.m. and we're at St. John's Northwestern Military Academy. I am interviewing Ralph Simoneau, who was born on July 15th, 1925 in Washburn, Wisconsin, and served in World War II from 1943 to 1946. Ralph Simoneau was a private first class in the Marine Corps and served as a 60 millimeter mortar crewman. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. All right. So when did you enlist in the Marine Corps?
I enlisted in the June of 1943. I just have one correction. My birthday is, you made me 10 years younger than I am. July 5th. July 5th is my birthday.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
No problem.
So when you enlisted, had you finished high school yet?
No, I quit school when I was about 15 years old, and I never finished. I should correct that. I finished after I got out of the Marine Corps. I went and took the GED test and got my diploma.
Oh. And why did you choose the Marine Corps?
Well, I don't know. It was, I guess they had the best promotion going on. And there seemed to be and the uniform, that got me, although I never got my blues, but the uniform was really something. And I went in, I was going to go in with a very good a buddy of mine, but he didn't pass the physical exam, so he went into the Navy, and so I went into the Marine Corps. And I was 18 years old when I was finally inducted, but I enlisted when I was 17.
And so before you were inducted, you went to boot camp?
Boot camp, right, at San Diego.
All right. And can you tell me a little bit about boot camp?
It's funny you should ask that because that's my favorite subject, boot camp. A Marine boot camp is different than any other boot camp because the major goal of boot camp in the Marine Corps is to reduce you to your lowest common denominator. You are no longer a human being. You are a piece of something else, but not a human being. And their major focus is to make you a Marine, but also, more importantly, to make you a member of the group. And that was accomplished in a number of different ways. The most common way was to punish everyone. If one potential Marine that screwed up in one fashion or another. Maybe his bunk wasn't made properly, and the DI in the morning would look around, and everyone would tear their bunks apart. They have to do their bunks over again. That was one of the easy things that they did. But anytime anyone did anything wrong, the whole group was punished. Another favorite punishment was the DI at 2 o'clock in the morning would wake us all up and say, "Get your toothbrushes and your canteens." And we'd go out to the parade ground, and we'd spend the next hour or two on our hands and knees scrubbing the parade ground with our toothbrush. And there was many, many different ways that we were punished for being something other than a member of the group. And gradually, it finally dawned on everyone that the best thing is that everyone does everything perfectly, and then we'll get along.
And so you adapted very quickly to military life then?
Yes and no. I was not the best Marine around, but yeah, and I liked it. Had I not gotten into a trouble that cost me some time in the brig, well, I probably would have stayed in the Marine Corps. But I every time I got a PFC stripe, well, I did something wrong, and that PFC stripe disappeared. So the chances of me making a career out of it would be very, very unlikely.
So after boot camp, did you receive any specialized training?
Yeah, after boot camp, we all went to Camp Pendleton. I volunteered for a specialty outfit called the Marine Raiders. That's what this patch means right here. And the Marine Raiders, I guess, would be probably, by today's standard, would be something like the Navy SEALs. It was a special unit. We did a lot of training, and But unfortunately, the need for that kind of specialty unit gradually disappeared, so they disbanded the Raiders and also the Marine paratroopers, and we became the core of the 5th Marine Division, which was designated to go to Iwo Jima.
And so what was your specific role in Iwo Jima?
Well, I was a member of the 60 millimeter mortars. I can show you a picture of my unit here. And it was not a very effective weapon, an offensive weapon on Iwo Jima because of the territory. So basically what we used it for more often than not was just to shoot flares up at night, which I thought was a huge mistake because what it did was make the shadows even darker. And if you happen to glance up at all, well, the chances are you couldn't see for the next 2 or 3 minutes. So it just was not, in my opinion, a very good idea to shoot up those flares. So during the day, we basically turned into just a rifle company. But this is what my unit looked like.
Okay. And in this photo here, you're practicing with the flares?
That's right. Yeah, you're setting up and aiming and giving ammunition to the gunner, et cetera, et cetera. It was just a constant repetition so that you knew your job just 100%. There was never a doubt in your mind of what your job was because you were constantly, your training was all a repetition.
And you said during the day you were just basic riflemen.
Right.
Did you witness a lot of casualties and destruction?
Yes, it was very hard to take. And one of the strangest thing is I don't believe that in the 36 days I was on Iwo Jima, I saw at the very most 10 alive Japanese, because they had dug tremendous holes in the ground and tunnels and everything. Some of the tunnels were even like 7 stories deep. So, and Japanese were experts at camouflage and concealment. And so it was just not a face-to-face kind of war. More often than not, you were shooting at a sound, you were shooting at a movement, something, you know.
And did you face a lot of challenges with the territory?
Did I face a lot of what?
Challenges?
Well, yeah, a challenge was just staying alive and making sure that you're looking after your buddy, because that was the number one important thing. You never thought about yourself. You thought about, is my buddy all right? Is he okay?
And with your mates in battle, did your unit face a lot of casualties?
Yeah, well, I'm not a big believer of medals. Because I think the system is somewhat flawed in how medals are handed out. But one medal that I'm very proud of is the Presidential Unit Citation, which is this middle one right here. And the 27th Marines is a regiment. And combat ready, our regiment was about 3,000. So 3,000 Marines from the 27th regiment, the 27th regiment, hit Iwo Jima, and there was only 500 of us left that island. So the President of the United States, seeing what the 27 Marines lost in that battle, issued us the Presidential Citation. And I think that's much better than singling out individuals and saying, you know, well, here you did this and here you did that, et cetera. And to honor a whole unit for what they did, I think is much better than individual.
Do you have any distinct memories of serving on Iwo Jima?
Well, the biggest memory, and it's kind of a funny memory, I was in the first wave on Iwo Jima, and basically initially, most of the islands in the Pacific that the Marines took, the first, second, and third wave was really the worst, because the philosophy of the Japanese at that time was to keep us off the island. They did whatever they could to keep us off of the island. And Kuribachi, the commanding general of Iwo Jima, looked at the history of World War II and thought that the philosophy was flawed because it just didn't work. Because every island that the Marines landed on, we ultimately took. So trying to keep us off was not the answer. So what Kuribachi did for this particular battle is he decided, well, we'll let the Marines get on. And when about the fourth or fifth wave starts coming in, that's when we'll pour all of the mortars and artillery at them. Because now it'll be all jammed up, and which it was, because of the terrain of the beach. So we didn't have the casualties in the first wave and the second wave that was normal. But after that, things heated up quite a bit. Total, the Marines lost 7,000 Marines were killed. Roughly 7,000 Marines were killed, and 24,000 Marines were wounded on that battle. And there was, I think, around 22,000 Japanese. So we killed about 21,000. I think there was maybe 1,000 or 1,200 prisoners. But other than that, so it was a very, very costly battle. As a matter of fact, 1/3 of all the casualties in World War II happened on Iwo Jima. 24 medals of honors was given out on Iwo Jima, more than any other battle in World War II. 7 of those Medal of Honors were given to Marines that fell on hand grenades in a foxhole to save their buddies. So the philosophy, the core of the Marine Corps was to watch out for your buddies.
Were you on the island when the battle ended?
Yes. Matter of fact, my outfit, what was left of it, was, I think, about the last unit to leave the island. And I have something that's rather disturbing from my viewpoint that happened on that last day. There was probably about 100 yards or 200 yards left of the island. We were going north, continually going north, and the Japanese were most of them were starting to run away. And the Japanese philosophy is death before dishonor. Dishonor is being caught. So they were committing suicide. They were jumping off the north end of the island, which was the north end was probably about 300 feet high. So it was quite a drop to go down. So as we were going, there was a number of Japanese running, and they were running away from us, of course, and we reached a particular area that had a little rise on it that was perfect for setting your rifle on, which gave you a good sighting, and we all started shooting at these Japanese that were running away. And after they were all shot and killed, a bunch of us were walking up and kind of looking down at them, and one guy said, well, this Jap must weigh another 50 pounds because of all the lead in his back. And we all kind of started laughing about that. And I was laughing about it also. When we got back on ship and started heading back to Hawaii, I thought about that, and I'm a Christian. And I believe very firmly that all people are God's children. We're different, we have different cultures, we look differently, we talk differently, but we're still all God's children. And it's difficult for me to see justification for killing one of God's children. In all my training, not once did I ever hear that the goal was to kill the enemy. Not once, and I had a lot of training. Marines are the best trained individuals in the world. That's why we're the best fighters in the world. But not once was there any mention that I had to go out and kill somebody. And one of the commandments says, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill unless, or it's all right to do this. In my mind, it says thou shalt not kill. The goal for me and for the Marines in taking Iwo Jima was to go from point A to point B. Now we understand that the enemy, your adversary, does not want you to go from point A to point B. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get killed. But from my perspective, the goal was not killing. And had I thought the goal was killing, had I knew that the goal was killing, I really don't know if I could do that. So to get back aboard ship, and I started thinking about this, and I was really disgusted with myself that I would stand over these dead soldiers and laugh about it. As a matter of fact, even today, I have difficulty accepting that.
So that continues to have a significant emotional impact on you.
Absolutely, absolutely. As does the Marine Corps. Honor, courage, commitment. Those are words that stick with us our whole life. Commitment. Proof of my commitment, that I can make commitments, is a year and 6 months ago, my wife died. We were married 68 years. That's longer than I think anyone here has been alive. So I made a commitment when I married her. And those commitments that I learned in the Marine Corps, those core values that I learned in the Marine Corps are with me, as they will be and are on my buddy Bob. Because Marines are all very, very proud of their commitments. We're very, very proud of being a Marine.
And so with your fellow Marines, where did you go after Iwo Jima?
Well, we went back to Hawaii, and we were starting to train to invade Japan. And I say thank God for Harry Truman, President Harry Truman. I say he saved my life, because they were talking about over 1 million casualties on our side when we would try to invade Japan. So it was really difficult training to invade Japan, because we knew we were going to go and invade Japan. We didn't know where we were going when we went to Iwo Jima. I think we were about 4 or 5 days from Iwo Jima, and then they finally brought out some maps and some models, and we finally knew where we were going, which didn't make any difference, but at least you knew it. But when we got back to Hawaii, we knew that we were training to invade Japan. And we knew, because of the Japanese philosophy of no surrender, that we were going to be having one hell of a battle on our hands. And very, very many of us were going to die.
So what was your reaction to knowing that the atomic bomb had been dropped?
Oh, that was the best day of our lives, because we knew it was over.
And then you continued to serve in the Japanese occupation?
Right. After things settled down a bit, we started to head Japan, and I was in the occupation for actually 11 months. And that's kind of an interesting, kind of a funny story also. After about 3 or 4 months, they instituted what they call some kind of point system for going back home. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was X number of points for overseas duty and X number of points for duty in America. And if you had, I'll say 60 points, why then you were eligible to head back home. And I guess everybody had 60 points but me. And I went to the company commander and I said, what's happening here? You know, all my buddies are going home and Simoneau's still here. What's happening? And he got the record book and said, well, let's see, Simoneau. You went to the brig here at 30 days, so that's an X number of 24 points. And let's see this. Oh yeah, here you went to the brig for 15 days, so that's X number of points. And here's another trip to the brig. So it took me 11 months before I got enough points together to go home.
And what is the brig exactly?
The brig is jail.
Okay.
It's prison. I wish some of the people in jail now or prison, they would experience some of Marine Corps prison once, and they'd know what prison is all about.
And what specifically was your role during the occupation?
Initially, we landed in Sasebo, which is a big naval base in Japan. And we went through a bunch of warehouses and we're looking for armament of whatever. And then they were trying to figure out exactly what they were going to do with each one of the units. And finally they decided that the 27th Marines would go to Saga, Japan, which was a medium-sized town in the middle of the Kyushu, the island of Kyushu. And when we got there, they were looking for volunteers. And one thing you never do in the Marine Corps is volunteer, but I never learned that very well. I volunteered a couple of times. But I volunteered. They were putting together an MP unit, which is military police, if you don't know what MP means. And so I joined that, and we took over the police station in Saga, and the Japanese police kind of cooperated with us, and we kind of did a lot of police work, but actually our major function was to keep all of the guys, the Marines, out of the cat houses, because suddenly there was a lot of diseases going on that was transmitted from these cat houses to the Marines, and so many guys were in sick bay that the brass decided that something had to be done. And so they closed all of these places, but they took a bunch of the gals and put them in the hospital and cleaned them all up, and then they opened up about 3 or 4 of these places and said, okay, Marines, this is where you go. 3 or 4 months later, the news got back home to a bunch of the mothers and what have you, and they decided that was terrible, that the Marine Corps was allowing these boys to do this and that and whatever. So a couple of the commanding generals in the Marine Corps that were in Japan at the time, they got sent back home, and they got rid of all of these places that the boys were going to. But it was very interesting. I never felt or saw any animosity from the Japanese people. As a matter of fact, a couple of families befriended me, and I stayed overnight in their houses and ate their food, and I'm sure that the American people would be exactly the same under the situation, because war and killing is for military, and the civilian population has very little contact or even knowledge of a lot of what's going on. So they were very, very nice people.
And when you were off duty, what would you do for recreation?
Well, mostly sightseeing. There was a town that a lot of us went to. The name of it was Karatsu. It was probably a resort, kind of a resort town, much like maybe Door County or something like this. A lot of people went there, and it was a very nice. There was a lot of old Japanese, I don't know what they call them, temples or whatever, religious things. So there was a lot to see. So I did a lot of sightseeing. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera, so I never got any pictures at all out there. But it was a very, very good experience. In some ways, I'm glad that I was a bad Marine and I got punished and I had to stay there longer than everyone else. So it worked out for me.
And following those 11 months, did you return to the U.S.?
Yes, I returned, and I went to North Division High School because that's where where I was going to high school when I quit. And I says, well, I'd like to, enroll and finish my education. And they kind of laughed and said, well, you can get your education with testing, et cetera. So I did go through that. And then later I went to Milwaukee State Teachers College, and I found the love of my life, and so I quit that. But I went to work. I had a number of different jobs, and ultimately I ended up with the Milwaukee County Transit System. I made a 30-year career out of that, and I did teach at Mount Mary College and El Verno College for about 17 years. I was at Mount Mary. I was called a visiting artist, and at El Verno, I was just an instructor. So.
How were you received by your friends and family upon your return?
Yeah, they were all very, very happy to see me and glad that I come back unharmed. And yeah.
Did you have trouble readjusting to?
Yes, I did have a lot of trouble readjusting because given the things that I've seen and had to do, even when I went to Milwaukee State Teachers College, I just didn't fit in, and I think that's one of the reasons that I really quit, because I just couldn't fit in. My life experience was so much greater than anyone else there, and I didn't feel comfortable talking about it at all. So for many years, I really didn't feel I didn't fit in anywhere. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. Had many jobs. I couldn't hold a job. So yeah, it was difficult for me to adjust.
And reflecting back on your whole service, what would you consider to be your most important contribution? I
think it was my expertise, as it were, with the tools of war. I shot sharpshooter in the rifle range. I also qualified on the bayonet and the hand grenade, and I was kind of a standby in combat. If anything happened to the gunner in our mortar section, well, I would take over that. So I was, in that respect, I guess I was kind of valued because I always learned my lessons very well.
And do you have any examples of strong leadership that you encountered?
Back then, the officer leadership was lacking because the officers were basically mostly as new as we were. They were all brand new. The sergeants were really the guys that ran everything. A funny story, we were, when we got to Iwo, we were on an LSD, and we left the LSD in what was called an Amtrak, which is a vehicle that goes on water or land. And as we first got off and we were circling, we were looking at it, and most of the guys felt like we were on a vacation because we were looking and the bombing was going on and strafing, and you were maybe 2,000 or 3,000 yards away from it. It was like a TV show. You would think a TV show going on. We're all watching. The closer we got to the island, the more quiet it became on that Amtrak, until finally there was hardly anybody saying anything, and Sergeant Beals, who did duty earlier, and he was a combat veteran, did duty earlier. He looked around at us, and he said, if anybody says this is it, I'm going to kick their butt. And everybody started laughing, and it brought us back to the reality of things. And Sergeant Beals, many years later at a reunion, I met him, and I said to Sergeant Beals, I said, "Thank you for saving my life." And he said, "Why? What was that, Ralph?" He says, "Well, I did everything that you told me to do as quickly as I could possibly do it." And I said, "I think that's why I'm alive today."
And have you remained in contact with any of these?
Yes, I remain in contact with a number, and I've attended many of my outfit reunions over the years. My wife and I have traveled to virtually every city in the United States with our reunions. It took a long time for me to get involved in that because I just didn't want to run around and play soldier and what have you. But one of the guys, a dear friend of mine, Marine friend, Bill Gropp, talked me into joining the organization, and I did. And from that point on, I think it's been maybe 30, 35 years I've been going to our reunions each year, which is in a different place every year, you know. So it's been nice for traveling, and it's been nice to meet some of my guys. Although 5 or 6 years ago, I told my wife, I said, "Sugar," I called her Sugar, and I really shouldn't. Maybe that's why I have diabetes, because I married Sugar, you know. I don't know. But I told her, I said, "Sugar," I said, "I don't know if I can handle these reunions anymore, because every time at the business meeting, they read all of the names of the guys that died from the last reunion." And I said, I don't know, I just can't handle this, you know. So, but it's so nice to meet the old guys and meet new people that are looking for, "Did you know Uncle Joe? You know, gee, my dad did this," and they're all looking for information and whatever. So it was hard to give up, you know, and I haven't given it up. You know, I just came back from Hawaii in October for my Marine Corps reunion. So.
And you did return to Iwo Jima 50 years later.
Yeah, 50 years later, I went back for the 50th anniversary, and I brought back some of the black sand, and also my box here has got it. The airlines gave us a little tube to fill up when we hit the beach there. Yeah.
And do you have any last remarks, any lessons that you've learned?
Well, I guess the biggest lesson was do what they tell you and don't get yourself in trouble. Because some of my punishment was pretty severe. One cost me 30 days on bread and water in solitary confinement in a cell that you could not completely stretch out and you could not stand in, and your shoulders touched each one of the walls. 30 days in solitary confinement. You didn't talk to anybody. Every 5th day, the guard came and it would march you to the mess hall, and you would have a full ration on a 5th day, but all the other time, all you had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner was bread and water. And in addition, that cost me $350 fine, and at that time, in 1943, we were earning, I think, like $62 a month or something. So I think I'm still paying for that fine.
All right, well, I'll come on over. In closing, this has been an interview of Ralph Simoneau regarding his service during World War II. My name is Emily Willis. The time is 5:38. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.